This week, we welcome Dan DeClaus, the president and CEO at PlexTrac, to talk about how to improve pen testing outcomes with purple teaming. In our second segment, we welcome Ambuj Kumar, the CEO and co-founder of Fortinix, to discuss the keys to your kingdom, protecting data in hybrid and multiple public clouds. In the security news, car hacking hits the streets. 4 Ring employees are fired for spying on customers. MITRE ATT&CK presents the ICS aspect of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Las Vegas suffers cyber attack on the first day of CES. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. This message is brought to you by Spirion. The data privacy revolution is the new age of protecting what matters most. Automatically and persistently discover and classify sensitive data with the most accurate solution on the planet. Understand the data within the context of your business and then take actions to control that data so you can operate with minimal friction and comply with the laws and regulations built to protect the personal data privacy of individuals across the globe. This is Spirion, protecting what matters most. Visit them on the web at securityweekly.com/Spirion.
Oh, hey. Welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a guy who smells kind of sticky. Paul Sidorian.
Hey, welcome everyone to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode 634, recorded January 9th, 2020, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, which is where Mr. Larry Pesce is sitting with me.
I am.
At the table.
The round table.
At the round table, yes. It's very nice. I like your shirt.
Thank you.
Faceless Han Solo.
Yes. Yeah, I got it for Christmas from, apparently my wife got it at Five Below.
That's awesome.
So like, all right. Retro.
Lee's got a very interesting shirt on. He's remotely this evening. Lee, welcome.
Great to be here, back at home for this week. And yes, my wife got me a button-down Oxford tie-dye shirt, just to be different. Normally a Friday kind of shirt, and I thought this was a great day to wear it.
Absolutely. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. You're in a different location, Mr. Jeff Mann.
I am. My wife and I snuck off to the beach for. She's doing scrapbooking all weekend, and I'm basically doing the heavy lifting and the driving. And I'm like, I'm working remotely. I might as well be at the beach.
There you go. Yep, fantastic.
But you look more like a hotel.
And I have a T-shirt on too that just talks about research.
Oh, look at
Good
that!
stuff.
Very nice.
But Jeff, you don't look like you're at the beach. You look like you're in a hotel room, there, buddy.
Well, technically, I am at a hotel room, and if it was daytime and the window was open, I'd be staring at the ocean.
Cool.
So I'm in an oceanfront room.
Very nice. Very jealous. Join us at InfoSec World 2020, March 30th through April 1st at the Disney Contemporary Resort. Security Weekly listeners get 15% off the InfoSec World Main Conference or World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2020 and click the register button to apply our discount code. Matt Alderman and I will be hosting a day-long container security summit, as well as lots of interesting talks happening at the conference. So I'm already prepping for our day of container security by bashing my head against the wall with various configurations that I'm experimenting with. Just don't try and use Docker secrets right now. It's just
not good right now.
It's not. Well, I mean, you could make it work, but not in the right configuration. You know what I mean? Like, I want this feature and that feature, and like that recipe doesn't bring it all together. In any case, Daniel DeCloss is here with us. He's the founder and CEO of PlexTrac. We welcome him back to the program this evening to talk about pen testing and purple teaming. Dan, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yes, nice to have you back on the show. Now, the landing page, securityweekly.com/PlexTrac, which I think probably redirects to your website, correct?
That's
And you've got some special stuff for our listeners. We talked about a lot of things in prep for this segment. You've got some white papers and cheat sheet kind of information. You've got some demo videos. You're giving us a free month to the product. So fill us in on all that.
Yeah, so I mean, we do have some videos out there now that kind of highlight some of the newer features, and we can run through some of those new features later in the segment. But definitely offering a free month subscription to PlexTrac for Security Weekly listeners, and got all kinds of new content, new website actually since we last spoke. So that's exciting. Yeah. And then heading into RSA, we're actually going to have another white paper that we'll release, and it'll include some cheat sheet information as well. So lots of new stuff going on, lots of exciting things here at PlexTrac. So.
That's awesome. The cheat sheet stuff, was that on purple teaming? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, we're developing a purple teaming white paper and not quite ready to release it yet. So I know we had talked about that, but we're ready to. We'll have it ready in prep for RSA, and a lot of the things we'll talk about today. We'll kind of cover in the white paper.
Fantastic. I think that purple teaming definitely came up during our state of pen testing roundtable as one of the advancements in pen testing, I would say, that is getting away from, I think, some of the, folks that want to take the opposite viewpoint of pen testing and say, well, it's not effective because, and typically the argument is, pen tester just comes in, they break into a bunch of stuff, they write a report, they give you the report, and then they go away, and that's it. And there's no time spent with the pen tester between red and blue teams that might exist in the enterprise, and that report is just a state and time and just kind of gets emailed around, and they may or may not fix stuff, right? I think purple teaming and tools like PlexTrac were some of my arguments against that in our roundtable. So, Dan, if you'd like to elaborate.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a good segment. I thought it was a really interesting discussion, and I think that everybody has, purple teaming itself is kind of a different term, right? That some more of the traditional security professionals may not still be familiar with. Even though in the pen testing community we use the term a lot, I think a lot of people throw it around a lot. To us at PlexTrac, it really means that genuine collaboration between the red and the blue teams, whether it's an internal team or an external team, and like you mentioned in that segment over the holidays, that there needs to be a lot more collaboration, with the true consultative nature that pen testers provide. I think early on, some of us got away with just saying, "Hey, we found this cool stuff. You should go fix it," right? And that doesn't work, right? And my experience, having been on the red team side, is like you want to actually provide actionable information that people can go and take and learn from, as well as improve their security posture. Then having been on the blue team, it's like, I want to collaborate with these professionals, these experts that are finding these complicated ways to exploit vulnerabilities in our network, and work with them and help them understand for the rest of the team how we can fix these things. And that truly is the general concept for purple teaming that we take here at PlexTrac, and why PlexTrac can be such a valuable platform for that type of engagement.
Absolutely. And when you say collaboration between red and blue teams, those can be external or internal red teams, right? Because in your experience with providing the software, it's a mixture, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we supply to enterprises that have their own internal red teams or assessment teams. I mean, truly, PlexTrac can support any kind of assessment, and I think that's kind of why the purple concept starts to kind of get a little blended. Is that even if it's not a penetration test, but if it's a deeper dive in a risk assessment or a framework-based assessment, you can still do those. And now you have all this information that you can just continue to aggregate into one source and then be able to provide analytics on. So it helps the blue team in centralized metrics and reporting up the chain to the board and any executive staff. And so those are the kinds of the customers that we support are both external teams that are using it not only for just a really good report writing tool, but being able to collaborate with their customers as well.
And one of the things that I really like about the purple teaming exercise is, you can say, well, I've got this attack, and the blue team's like, okay, I saw that, and then the red teamer can be like, wait, hold on, let me just change that a little bit, and then see if it gets in, and then they're like, oh yeah, that definitely got in, and then the red teamer and blue team can be like, well, let's change this configuration, let's rerun the same attack, and then let's modify it again, right? Like that style of testing that goes beyond automated tools. And don't get me wrong, automated tools give you a tremendous amount of value. But
you need to use some automation.
Yes, absolutely. But that manual testing and iterating through the offense and defense in real time, I think, is one of the great values of purple teaming.
Does the question of how the hell did you do that come up much? In other words, teach me how that worked in the first place? Or is that too low level for what the kind of teams you're dealing with?
No, I think what we established certainly in the roundtable discussion was that a good penetration test, specifically a purple team exercise, is the blue team learning how the attacks work, right? I mean, that's a part of being on a blue team, right? Dan, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that the part of what you're as a blue team you're paying for is to educate your team, right? Is to be able to say like, hey, how are you doing this? And then be able to take that back and be able to replicate it to some degree. Hopefully you have talent on the blue team that can say like, okay, I know some of the general concepts. I can now take this back. And so we've paid a good for a really high quality assessment, maybe an annual assessment. And then, the next 3 quarters out of the year, our blue team can try and replicate some of these activities, some of the MITRE attack techniques and things like that, to then be able to improve and, a rising tide lifts all boats, so to speak, so that the high quality and high caliber purple team engagement helps educate the blue team throughout the year.
Yeah, what I like too is, the blue team maybe has configured something and the red team is testing it, and then the blue team goes, okay, well, let me update it and change this configuration, and then it makes it a little harder, but it's still exploitable. And I think, when you go back and forth so many times, I can foresee the situation where the red and blue teams just think, all right, let's stop. The blue team goes, I need to just rethink my entire strategy around that, right? And so one of the projects that I'm working on, sorry, I stepped on my mute button. One of the projects I'm working on is, how to protect containerized environments. And you start looking at all the different options for, trusting images and secrets. And there's levels, right? So there's one way to protect the secrets. Then there's the native Kubernetes way. And I know that those aren't great, right? And blue teams, that might be what they're stuck with. And then you're going to reach a point where you go, yeah, we need to just do a whole new vaulting system, which requires a re-architecture and a new project. And what I like about this purple team exercise with PlexTrac is you can just put all that in the system and go, this is what we did, this is the interim defensive steps, and there's a new project that we're tracking, so let's come back to that when this is done, right? Do you see people doing that? I hope you see people getting to that level, Dan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the valuable aspect of having it being a living thing, right? So it's not just a report that you wait 6 weeks to get back from the consultant, or however long it takes, because some of these things can be pretty complex and comprehensive, and so you can be writing the report and you can be having this ongoing collaboration in real time. And also some of our customers, they will be on engagements for many weeks. And so they can actually report things, as they progress, and the blue team can immediately start to begin to work and fix on that. And they can have that collaboration, even if it's not we're sitting next to each other, but over the course of a few weeks, you can go into the analytics module and see everything that's changed. And then you can add a status update and say, hey, we've moved this in process because these are the new defense mechanisms that we feel we've put in. Can you retest this? So yeah, we definitely see people doing that, and that's one added value for having this living report, right?
Yeah. And some defensive mechanisms are much easier to implement than others. Like, oh, I'm going to use this host-based firewall. I'm going to add this other product. Like even adding some type of agent-based or module-based security protection either in your containers or on your work. Today it's pretty easy to get it implemented, but maybe not fully configured. But then you get to, we need to drastically change something, right? We need to do a big project in Active Directory. We need to move these pieces of Active Directory up into the cloud, into Azure, right? And rethink some of the aspects of how our directory is configured. And you can track all of that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the important point there is prioritize it as well. Like once you identify that, then using tools like PlexTrac and maybe some other integrations to help prioritize those efforts, because not everything has the same level of priority.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the end goal is to be able to every day have someone log in and say, these are the high priority items I need to be working on today. I think you kind of highlighted it in that other segment, is that there's a lot of just daily hygiene issues in the cybersecurity, in our industry, right? I mean, it's like, there's no doubt. And so, whether a company is ready for a pen test or not, I mean, I think, you guys covered, all angles of that pretty well. But I mean, at the end of the day, if they're getting a pen test, it's going to highlight the things that they're not doing well, and really having a consulting firm or a trusted advisor come alongside and say, these are the processes and procedures that need to be in place to really improve your overall technical capability for preventing these things. And that's what we aim to try and show within PlexTrack is this is the priority, and you don't lose sight of those issues either, right? So an issue that's a low or a medium today could end up being a high or a critical tomorrow, right? And so trying to constantly be aware of hey, these were the things that we were tracking before. What's the status? How are we doing? And do we need to escalate this, in a higher priority?
Yeah, that reassessment of the priority, I think, is really critical today. And I also think that the findings from the pen tester that go beyond maybe what's already included in MITRE ATT&CK and what goes beyond, basic patching, that's not why you should be having a pen test, right? Because a lot of that stuff you can test on your own, right?
You just have to have the time and the expertise to do it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because I'm kind of noodling over that as I'm listening to us talk and sort of reading the description in the wiki, and I was trying to figure out a polite way of saying what, because the setup is the pen testing in whatever form it's happening is producing vulnerabilities, and of course my first thought is pen test shouldn't produce vulnerabilities, but let's be optimistic and say, well, they're reporting on vulnerabilities that are a result of threading vulnerabilities together and actually exploiting things that are still in the network that about already, because there's other ways to identify vulnerabilities. So I guess the question that I was curious about asking is, what does PlexTrack do in terms of helping with remediation, in terms of recommendations, in lieu of or beyond simply, and the thing that I'm most familiar with is a Nessus output where it says install the patch or, change a configuration or do something like that. What does PlexTrack do, or maybe it does similar things in order to make recommendations about remediation?
Yeah, no, great question. And I mean, first and foremost, we're a data aggregator. We don't supply content through the platform, right? So we empower the testers to write their own reports. And so we do have a write-ups database that has some pre-built content from other sources. It's not our content. Things like Nessus and Burp and those kinds of things, that they provide their own recommendations. So that can be a starting point for analysts or testers that are creating reports. But first and foremost, PlexTrack, spawned out of being a pen test reporting tool. So making the report writing process easier and faster and more efficient, and then being able to deliver those reports. So we definitely rely heavily on, solely on the people generating those reports to be writing those recommendations. And that's kind of what comes back to my comment around, that one of the main goals of a pen test and a purple team engagement itself is that you've hired this trusted advisor not only to find the exploitable weaknesses in your environment, but to help come alongside you and educate you on how you can fix those. And so that's where those recommendations would come in.
Yeah, and I also think beyond vulnerabilities, what I've gathered, especially recently, is about testing certain techniques. And while you may have let's say, a breach and attack simulation tool that's testing a technique from, let's say, MITRE ATT&CK, a pen tester may come in and maybe use some other different vulnerabilities, expose some other kind of configuration, and go, yeah, like these specific tools and techniques, TTPs, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, you're safe against, but if I change this or use this or get this piece of data from this other thing, then I can totally have that, find that path and be successful, and then work with the team to say, okay, well, how do we shut that down? How do we make that path much harder to go down? That's a well-known path, but there's different ways you can walk down the path, Jeff. You can run, you could skip, right? Mm-hmm. I guess it's a really bad analogy, but I don't know.
Whatever floats your boat, Paul. And I have just a silly, and I like to play the ask the stupid question role, but I think we all work on the assumption that we know what we're talking about. But for the benefit of the listening audience that may not know what we're talking about, what is the basic definition? And I'm sure that there's more than one, but for the purposes of our discussion, what exactly is a purple team?
Oh, that's a great question. And so at PlexTrac, we take a little bit more abstract view, right? So, I think traditionally, purple teaming came out of kind of like just a sole purple team engagement where you've got a red team conducting a penetration test type exercise against an enterprise or a network, and they may be either sitting with a blue team or sitting across the table with a blue team, or having a virtual kind of session where it's like, hey, we're trying this out, we're trying this attack technique, and the blue team saying, okay, we're not seeing anything in the logs, we're not seeing anything in any alarms, or hopefully maybe they're saying, yeah, hey, you know what, we're catching that, or the red team saying, hey, our payload's not executing because your defenses have stopped it. So like the purple team is truly that concept of red and blue mixing together to make purple, right? but
the idea essentially is that there's collaboration, it's interactive, it's they're actively involved in the process. It isn't simply, or maybe this is a variation where you hire a red team or you have a red team that starts an engagement and you're waiting to see if the blue team even detects the activity.
Exactly. And that's why I would say is a traditional purple team engagement. We kind of try to take it a step further in that the purple team is truly an ongoing thing, right? And so whether you've hired an external company to do routine red team type exercises against your environment, or you have an internal red team doing those exercises, PlexTrac is really aimed to facilitate that collaboration on an ongoing basis, right? So you can have a consolidation of all the reports or all the engagements over time, be able to track those analytics. We just added a tagging functionality, which is great, and we'll show you here in a sec, but that you can then begin to say like, hey, we've tagged these findings that are respective to lateral movement within the MITRE ATT&CK tactics. So now we can run analytics and see where we're weak or strong based on those tags, right? So I didn't mean to cut you off.
I have one. No, that's fine. No, I appreciate that. I have one last question, and it's kind of based on one of the stories that I found that I included, and we'll talk about in the news segment later on. But basically this article was talking about how these companies, the CEOs of these companies, hired external third-party pen testers and what a great idea it is and how it helped them. Is there, and it made me wonder, is there an assumption in our industry these days, and anybody can answer this question, I guess, when we talk about a red team exercise, are we assuming, or is it assumed that that's a third-party engagement? Primarily, or is it, because it certainly seems that way the way I read some of these articles and things we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think probably I think it sounds like most of us have been in this industry a long time. So my immediate jump is to a third party engagement, because most enterprises or most companies don't have an internal assessment team that, or a pen test team or red team or ethical hacking team, whatever you want to call it. So I think my immediate gut reaction is yeah that's an external assessment from a third party. But I think that tide is shifting, as it should. I think that more and more enterprises are hiring internal talent to be able to conduct some of those exercises. And I think that's important. I think having the talent internally to be able to do that, as well as having an extra set of eyes periodically throughout the year, is important as well.
Well, and you're touching on something that I think is interesting in terms of how this whole industry, as it were, is evolving, in that it sounds like, and I think we would all mostly agree to this, that traditionally the idea of red teaming, blue teaming, purple teaming is, the company against a third party, the company against an outsider. The blue team is the, company, the red team is the outsider. And as that's evolving and changing, because it doesn't have to be, then my mind immediately jumps to, well, if both the red team and the blue team are internal, company resources, doesn't that sort of, then what is the red team? What is the blue team? Who's offense? Who's defense? It all gets a little bit jumbled in my brain, which may be why it's better to just call it purple at the end of the day.
There you go. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
He answered his own damn question.
Yeah.
Damn, this is good whiskey.
Classic. Must be that fresh beach air.
It is.
Did you say bitch air?
Beach
Oh,
air.
got
beach
it.
air.
Okay.
So,
That's different.
Dan, how important, and I'll give my opinion on this, is the kind of breach and attack simulation tools? Because when we talk about purple teaming and then having a tool like PlexTrac, right, I think a nice complement to that, almost a requirement in my mind, is to have some type of breach and attack simulation software. For one, the blue team can iterate through the kind of standardized attacks that come with the frameworks, right? Then when you do a purple team exercise, you're going to iterate through some things and find conditions that, fixed or not, you're going to want to test for moving forward. So coming out of that purple team exercise, the internal or external red team should be creating simulations for those attacks, putting them in the breach and attack simulation, customizing them, right? And then the blue team can continue to iterate over those when it finds something, because we all know it's similar to software and DevOps, right? We all know that someone, when something doesn't work, may back out a security configuration or back out a patch, right? Or open up a firewall rule to make something work. And you may not have a red team or a purple team exercise scheduled for 3-6 months, but since you've coded that into your breach and attack simulation software that runs every week, now you're going to come up there, a ticket's going to get opened, an issue's going to flow into PlexTrac and go, hey, nope, you guys, we opened this up again, we need to close it back down. Am I just like in a utopian world right now?
Maybe.
It's great to speak it ideally. And I agree. I think that's where we need to get to as an industry on the whole. And just not knowing what you don't know, right, is something that you need to always kind of be aware of. And that comes down to those daily hygiene type things. When I was building out a blue team, my mantra has always been, and when I give talks to organizations or whatnot, especially with people that are just getting started, kind of building out their cyber defenses, everyone kind of tends to go to the reactive stuff, and we always kind of harp on, like, it's good. You got to be able to detect things that are happening in your environment, but you also can't spend all your time focusing on that, because you'll never catch up to the proactive activities. And those breach and attack simulations are the proactive activities that you need to be doing. So my mantra was, I went to the Naval Postgraduate School, so it's kind of a military school, and this is kind of where I picked that up. Is like, when you're in the field, when you're in theater, you're fighting while you're training, while you're fighting while you're training, right? So we're always in this battle, right, as a blue team. And so you do need to train to see if you're able to defend against these techniques as they come out. So I think it's a vital piece that is I think starting to progress, right, in terms of how people start to build out their blue teams, and hopefully we can all get to a more proactive state.
Agreed. how does threat intelligence play into this? Because I mean, the difference, right, is real attackers aren't going to do a purple team exercise with your organization, right?
Do you have the same agreement with the rest of the internet?
Yeah, you may have get a hold of some of their tradecraft, right? And I think we've been really hard on threat intelligence, and I think what's been happening for a long time, where I think it's valuable, is I was telling before the show, I was reading, I can't believe I'd never read this book before, Kingpin by Kevin Poulsen. And, essentially when a law enforcement invades any kind of forum or underground and starts collecting intelligence about vulnerabilities, threats, and malware that like haven't circulated in the public, if there's a mole in that organization, they're just funneling them out and signatures are created for them, threat intelligence is created for them, then we can simulate and model those in our own network and basically do the purple team without the attackers being present, right? Because we've gotten a hold of their tradecraft. I think that's a really valuable way to treat threat intelligence. Of course, it can expire pretty quickly. People figure out that there's moles, and that's been happening since the dawn of time, right? But certainly in security, it's been happening for a long time. It's nothing new. But where do you fall in kind of the threat intelligence aspect as it plays into purple teaming and also, tracking all of this activity in PlexTrac?
Yeah, no, great question. I think threat intelligence is another one of those areas that can get kind of nebulous depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Right? Depending, from a military, people that come from the military background, threat intelligence is a lot different data than other people might be getting. I think where it's important is the fact that there are things that are being exploited in the wild, and if you have that information at your fingertips, you can correlate it to the vulnerabilities or things that have been exploited on past or current pen tests or vulnerability scans, anything like that. And you can then be able to say like, okay, yeah, we need to bump this up into priority because this vulnerability was a medium or a low, but now because we have this chain of events that are happening in the world, which is a daily thing, we can start to reprioritize what we need to be doing, as well as being able to simulate those new techniques and those attacks. So I think it definitely plays into that proactive mindset. The part I struggle with is that when I was building on the blue team, getting those threat intelligence feeds always seemed to be kind of challenging, and you had a lot of vendors that had it kind of as their secret sauce, and so I'm not a threat intelligence expert, but I would hope that we're gonna get to a better state where that information is much freer, and people can grab it, without having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for it.
Right. Also, some of the reports I've read in the past, there's not much difference between the threat intelligence feeds, right? Because they're all, you're sniffing, you've got taps across the internet, right? You've got a limited amount of sources. Like there's only so many types of attacks. Like the malware is so, basically borrows from each other, right? That the number of unique attacks is pretty finite. And so let's say you paid for 12 feeds, right? Look at the data overlap in those 12 feeds. The studies that I've read in the past say there's a significant amount of overlap in those feeds. Also, I think, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Dan, we talked about, the maturity level, security maturity level quite a bit when we did a lot of those roundtables. I think if you're looking at threat intelligence data and modeling attacks, modeling zero-day, vulnerabilities and exploits, modeling malware that's really fresh and has just come out and hasn't been seen in the wild all that much, you're pretty high in the maturity scale, right? So I think you have to model your purple teaming and all of your red teaming exercises in accordance with your maturity model.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no sense in trying to get that advanced when you don't have like passwords, the password policy strength and those kinds of things. And so, yeah, it definitely is kind of a crawl, walk, run from cybersecurity perspective. We say it all the time, at least when I was building in the blue team, is like it's a marathon, not a sprint, and trying to focus on what are the things you really got to shore up quickly. One of the processes and procedures that you have to have in place so that you can iterate quickly on your maturity growth. So threat intelligence, even to a degree, certain purple teaming and attack simulation can be more mature. But that's the end goal, is that we can bring that down closer to that crawl phase, where it's like, hey, because we can go fast on some of the, within PlexTrac, we have the capability to do assessments and like self-assessments and even framework-based assessments. So you can at least start to get an idea and a feel for like where we should be starting, and then start to develop an action plan for like, okay, in the next 90 days, we're going to do this, right? And it's very similar in my mind. Maybe this is just the way I think, but like a software development lifecycle, right? And iterating quickly, from an agile, quote unquote, framework perspective.
Absolutely. Dan, you said there were some new features in PlexTrac that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've been working like crazy since we last met. A couple of the new things that I kind of wanted to highlight is, like I mentioned, this is just an import of a Nessus scan. Just to kind of get some initial data in there, but we have the capability now to add tagging to findings and reports. So you could say something like, let's say this was a lateral movement, right? And then that automatically tags that. So as you go through your reports, you can start tagging the findings for the different, whatever you want. Really, it's a good way to categorize those things.
Now, Dan, are you tagging for the MITRE ATT&CK framework?
You can, yeah. I mean, so we're big on that. So we include, at least in our demo app, we include a lot of the tactics and techniques. So you could, but really, it's up to you how you want to organize your data. So I mean, I think we have, something like here. Actually, no, that's not.
Will you tag it automatically depending on the source? Like if a Nessus scan has, or any other data you're importing has a tag for a MITRE ATT&CK framework item, will it automatically tag it in PlexTrac, or do you have to go in and add it?
Actually today you have to go in and manually tag it. But if there are fields that start coming in from those sources, we'll definitely add them, because I'm not sure. I have to look back at the Nessus reports, but
yeah, I'm not sure Nessus does. Yeah, that's a good question.
If they're bringing them in, we can definitely add them, right?
Gotcha.
I mean, it's very simple. Yeah. So, but that'll be nice too. And then being one thing we have on the roadmap is to do bulk tagging of things, right? So where you can do some bulk actions on these as well. But the nice thing is that so the things that you can tag in the platform now include clients. So if you have let's see, so we go over to Paul Security Weekly client, right? And we can say, like, let's say he's a healthcare client, right? Now we can start to do analytics, again, compare different clients, or, if you are using it as a client portal, your clients themselves can start to get a feel of the benchmark for the different types of tags, if they're tagged as a healthcare client or whatnot. So you can tag clients, you can tag reports. If we come into reports here, we can edit the report details, and we can say, hey, you know what? We're going to go ahead and tag this as a healthcare engagement as well. Some of the additional metadata, I can't remember if we had this in last time, but you can select the different methodologies that you were using, the engagement types themselves, as well as the operators who have been conducting the engagement. And then you can also tag findings, right? And so then that lends to some enhancements that we've made in the analytics section. So if we wanted to come in and start viewing, the clients that had healthcare, right, we can select those, and we can apply the filter here, and so then it starts to show, these are all the findings related to customers that have been tagged with healthcare, right? And so we can start to get that immediate prioritized view of the issues that we should start to be resolving. And so this is really, the enhancement from the purple teaming perspective, in that, the red team are the ones that have generated these issues, generated these findings. You've been collaborating back and forth, and the blue team can come in and start to see, like, okay, we've got these different reports that have this different distribution of findings. And so we can, now have a bird's eye view of how to prioritize fixing those issues.
And when you say by client, that can also be like a department, right, in your organization.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, if it's an enterprise customer, that could be a business unit, that could be a subnet. So people break down the clients into, those different kind of basically buckets, right? So it's just a way to organize the data. So we've added a lot to the analytics sections, even being able to show trends and even like from the activities perspective, you can start to say like, okay, how many issues have been reported in the last month? So we can come in here and you can see, let's see, we got to select one more here, and then we get all the issues that were reported today, right? So this can you can backdate this as far as you want, so that say you are running one of those long-term engagements, your customers could come in, or the blue team can come in and say, okay, well, how many issues, what changed in the last 2 weeks, right? And this will even report if the status has changed, right? So if someone did come in and change the status from open to in process or closed it out, you can get that trending as well. One other nice feature that has been a common request on the actually both the blue team and the red team perspective is being able to do some default actions when you are bringing in those Nessus or those other scan results. And so what you can do is, like, let's say instead of getting 100 some odd SSL findings, or say like informational findings into a report, what you can do is basically go ahead and say like, okay, I want to anything that's marked as SSL, right? I'm gonna go ahead and just select all of these, and I'm either going to link them to a single write-up in the write-ups database, right? Something like this. And so then, anytime these findings come in from that Nessus scan, they just map to this single finding. You can also do some other default actions like, hey, we know these are lows or informationals because they're in a different environment and air-gapped networks. So you can say, okay, I want to change all those to informationals when they come in. Or you could just ignore them altogether and say like, I don't care about them, I don't want to see them. And so those are some nice new features that help a lot on the vulnerability management side too. When you say, hey, all of these plugin IDs for this scan, just map them to this finding, because this is how we report and track that information.
That's interesting. What are some of the use cases for that, Dan? Is that like, I don't have this technology in this environment, or?
Yeah, so I think definitely the linking is very popular, where it's like, we know we have SSL or TLS issues, right? Mm-hmm. I just use that as an example. And so Nessus may report like 50 findings related to SSL TLS issues. And so instead of having to track 50 issues, I'm going to track one. I just know that these
that's a great use case. Yeah, and that's a very, having actually worked for Tenable, right? A very common request and problem with vulnerability scanners, right?
Yeah.
Is you do want to know all 50 individual things, right? Because someone's going to want to go through those potentially, right? Or you want to say, well, look, like these, and some of these do it natively, but it's nice to have a universal tool that does it. I know that I need to go from this version of software to the next version of software, and I know there's about 50 things that'll get fixed in that. So just treat that as one, not 50.
Yeah. And then another use case, which is also pretty important to a lot of our customers, is like if I have, or like, if you have, say you're using Nessus, Nexpose, and Acunetics in your environment.
Yep.
All those SSL issues from all those 3 different scanners, you want to just track to a single finding. So you can basically come into each scan result finding, let's say NetSpark, or, and we may not have many SSL results. So like you can bring in and map and start saying, okay, I'm going to map that as well to the same finding. And so now you've really helped in your deduplication across different scanners as well.
That's nice.
So and you have a lot more control over that. Some tools will try to automatically deduplicate if you bring them in, and we're taking a little bit more, give the control to the master perspective here. So across the different scanners, you can dictate, okay, all these findings are going to go to this single write-up in the write-ups database, and it can be across the different scanners. That's a really popular use case as well.
Sweet.
It sounds like you're lowering the bar a little bit, making things a lot easier.
Yeah, and I mean, this is, it's valuable from a tester's perspective because we as pen testers don't say hey, I'm just giving you a vulnerability scan, but we may use some of those scans, and instead of saying bring in all the results, it's only show me the criticals in the report and I'll then go adjust them. Or so we definitely have some customers where it's I don't want to see 99% of those findings that come in from the scanners, but I do want to see this one, right? So they can use that to kind of sift the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And then also on the vulnerability management side, the vulnerability management teams definitely hey, if it's in this, basically all I care about right now, because I'm so overwhelmed, I have so much noise, all the signal that I want are the criticals and highs. So for now, I'm just going to delete the lows and mediums. I'm not a huge proponent of that, but now they have that flexibility, right? And so that they can say, I'm not going to bring in all this data or map it to certain other issues, or even readdress the severity. So it's hey, we know this is an air-gapped network, so Tenable always calls this a critical, but we're gonna bring it in as a low or a medium, right? So,
right. So you're also able to remap the severity then.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe I didn't highlight that, but
that's fine. I mean, I may have missed it. You may very well have. So
no worries. But yeah. So you can change the severity if you have something selected.
Yeah. So Dan, let's change all of the criticals to lows.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's
piece of cake.
We're good, right? Our security is awesome.
Done. There we go.
That's the danger with
putting on my danger sensitive glasses. Makes everything dark.
Right? But that's the danger with some of these features, right? And security teams really have to keep tabs as we rely on other groups to manage their vulnerabilities, manage their remediation. We have to watch out for some of those conditions, right?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there are circumstances where that could be true. There could be compensating controls. There could be, other things that just make that finding not critical at all, right? I mean, that does happen. I think it's more the exception rather than the rule. But doing that, of course, on a global basis for every critical is probably not realistic.
Yeah, very bad idea.
I mean, it's realistic in the tool, but
not in practice.
Not for your job,
right?
Yeah.
It's great for attackers. That. I mean, attackers love. They're like, yes, go do that. It's great.
Yeah. A couple of improvements.
I'm sorry. At the very least, you should have a little pop-up that says, "Are you sure you want to recast this?"
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, that actually are there restrictions on who can recast the severity?
Yeah. So this is only available to the administrators of the tenancy themselves. So normal users cannot come in here and adjust these. Yeah. So it is meant to be restricted.
I'd like to recast severity. Tell me I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, there actually is a use case for this in PCI.
I knew it was right.
And it's a requirement that I don't think a lot of companies really take advantage of. It happens to be 6.1, where it says the companies need to come up with a risk ranking criteria, and it can be whatever. I mean, it needs to be realistic, but it gives you the opportunity. Let's say if you've got a system that's 7 layers deep in your network away from the internet, and the vulnerability that you've discovered on a target is a critical vulnerability, but requires internet access for exploitation. It's okay to perhaps download that, downgrade it or recast it. The trick with PCI is you can't do that on the fly when you see the results. You're supposed to have the criteria sort of pre-published and pre-existing and agreed upon based on network architecture and what other conditions you want to put into place. But most companies simply take the results that the scanner gives them and they go with that. And I so you got companies running around, trying to fix vulnerabilities that maybe they don't have to, given the topology or other protections that are in place.
Yeah. Now, what we need is, and I think this does exist, is when you're classifying your findings from, let's say, vulnerability scanners as a class of findings. When a penetration tester or maybe a real attack happens, or maybe a threat intelligence feed shows that an attack happened on someone else's network, let's say, you put that into the system, it automatically goes and reclassifies your vulnerability scanning data and says, no, wait, a pen tester actually used all these vulnerabilities to compromise sensitive data.
Yep.
So therefore, when you reclassify those, that's invalid now because someone has proven that they can use those to accomplish a certain goal.
What
right?
it did, the load opponents scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Which I agree with and I disagree with, because Renaud and I used to argue about this all the time when I was at Tenable, and I don't want to overstate his position, but he put a lot of faith in, or he put a lot of his belief in, is there an attack in the wild? Is there a known attack that can exploit this particular weakness, vulnerability, particularly when it comes up with cryptographic stuff. And we argued about this mostly with the SSL TLS thing of a few years ago. And while it can be argued that, there aren't a whole lot of attacks against exploitation of weaker forms of SSL or early TLS. And would anybody do that just to recover one, hypothetical transaction and one card number for all the computing power that's involved? I get that. My point with Renaud was, but PCI actually points to NIST documentation as the source document for what's considered strong cryptography, and NIST deprecated the protocols. So, for our PCI customers, for all of our customers when we're Tenable, that have to follow the NIST rules because they're government contractors, they're federal entities. Don't we owe it to them to say, no, you shouldn't be using this kind of stuff? So all that to say is that, while the attack in the wild is a reasonable indicator, I don't think it's or shouldn't be the only indicator of whether you should classify something as critical or not.
No, I agree. These vulnerabilities have been exploited in my environment as they stand and are configured today. Go reclassify. There's this happened in someone else's network, but that's not our network, and we may have configured something differently, right? As is the case with SSL, right? There's in most open source software, God forbid we talk about microservices and the way you can deploy software there. There's so much configuration that just because it happened in someone else's network doesn't mean you're just as vulnerable. And that, I definitely agree with you, Jeff.
And it doesn't mean you're not, though.
No, that's true too. Yeah.
It
might be harder.
A testing firm, and they do or they don't break into your network. Are you secure?
Right.
Who knows? It just means that they didn't work. They didn't succeed. The question I had on casting the risks down, aside from who can do it, is there any sort of a review interval we could put in there that so it was fine this month, but in a year maybe it should be checked to see if it's credible, or risk categorized, or whatever.
I've actually done that. I've actually done that with some of our own vulnerabilities. I've set my own time frames. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand the vulnerabilities. I've looked at it and I understand the impact, but I need this much time, right? And I'm going to accept that risk for now. And maybe I could be wrong, right? But I need 3 months to fix this, right? that's just the way the cookie crumbles right now. Sorry, Dan?
Oh yeah, no, I agree. So in terms of like being able to do that today, no, we don't have like any kind of reminder to go back and look at that. But I'll make a note. That's a good suggestion. A couple other improvements. In their assessments module, you can now save your progress. Before, as soon as you hit submit, it would submit and create a report. You can also add reviewers. So if you didn't want, let's see, like Doe, John, David Crockett, right? So you can, if you needed multiple people to be reviewing this assessment before it was, you had the ability to submit. You'll notice now that submit button goes away until someone approves it, and so you can also view those in progress assessments by kind of seeing where the status is. And that's very handy for some of our customers that are doing more risk-based assessments or third-party risk management, where they send these questionnaires off to their vendors, and their vendors log in and maybe say, hey, we've got 100 questions. 25 of them are John's, 25 are Bill's, and the rest are mine. You can assign those reviewers and make sure that the questionnaire doesn't get submitted until the end. And then I know we're kind of running short on time, so one last kind of thing to highlight is the ability for adding arbitrary artifacts to the engagement. I won't upload a file because I don't want to waste time. But basically, you can now. This was a common request: is that hey, I have all this data from the engagement, but I don't necessarily want to get it into the report, or certain things don't deserve to be in the report. But I do want to have those as artifacts to either let the blue team review those later, or if next year another test comes along, they can look at those artifacts from last year as well. So this is a nice kind of addition to the reporting function as well. And I will throw out a teaser. Like we're doing a release tonight, and we're in final regression testing. So I won't dare do a live demo. But we've got the asset management piece coming along to where now it's not just a text field, but it's actually genuinely an asset. So this is an example of one so that it's imported in. And you can start to deduplicate findings. So however many times that's been reported in a report, you start to get the instance count based on the asset itself. Another common popular request that we're ready to deliver. So
awesome. Yeah, Dan, it sounds like you listen to your customers, which is really important. Applaud you for that. And Security Weekly listeners get a free month by going to securityweekly.com/PlexTrack. Which, I mean, if you're an internal or external red team, there's no reason for you not to be using the software. I think that quote's on their website based on the first demo that Dan and team gave me. So it's a fantastic tool and constantly improving, which is you said you're in regression testing. So fingers crossed that all goes well. There's a new release pushed, and you can look for PlexTrack coming up at RSA. You'll be at Chris's conference, the Human Hacker Conference in Orlando, Wild West Hackin' Fest, both of them. I think you said both the...
Yeah, we'll be at both. Yeah, so we'll be in San Diego and Deadwood. That'll be fun.
Right, and Black Hat as well. So make sure if you're at those conferences, you go check them out. Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly yet again.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
And with that, we'll take a short break and come back.